Good morning, everyone. The next panel is going to be for hub operators. We're very privileged today to have a number of hub operators. I'd like to call my panel Morgan Chishala from ZECO, Aimable Rukunda from R-Switch, George Murage from IPSL, and Fidelis Muya from the Kenya Bankers Association. As they make their way to the stage, we've had a lot discussed about certain terms like interoperability, scalability, and sometimes data privacy and security. So I want them to first begin by, this panel is going to talk about the technical challenges to building an inclusive, interoperable system. So we want them to give us their experiences because these are people who have been working on these platforms and thank you. So in the interest of time, I will request Morgan Chishala from ZECO because he's a guest and I'm told he's the one who's traveled the farthest within this panel to tell us, because we have the issue of interoperability mentioned several times. So for you, what challenges have you faced with regard, first of all, what is interoperability in your view? What challenges have you faced and how have you overcome them?
Thank you, Victor, and good morning, everyone.
Oh, and you could tell us what you do at ZECO briefly. Okay. Yeah, your title and what you do.
Okay, so my name is Morgan Chishala. I'm heading the IT at the Zambia Electronic Clearing House. And the Zambia Electronic Clearing House is managing the national financial switch. I think that has been spoken of already by my CEO of Bankers Association of Zambia. So I think looking at the question posed, what is interoperability? I think for me, the definition goes two ways. There's a technical definition, and there's also a definition that suits well with the end user of the products that a digital financial service provider is offering. So at technical level, we're looking at various systems being able to handshake within the time that is expected for the handshake to happen, if you're considering instant payment systems. And on a customer perspective, we're looking at a customer accessing a financial service from the most convenient touch point. That is also a form of interoperability or a result of interoperability. So I think my definition can go in those two.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Looking at the challenges that we have encountered as the Zambia Electronic Clearing House, I think the first is just building from the last discussion from the panels that we had, the infrastructure. We're in a country where issues of power, issues of network connectivity are not fully spread out, but they are streamlined against certain areas and economic activity happening. So you will find that in far-flung areas, I think like indicated, having a day plus to access money that belongs to you isn't really something that is going to talk about the reality of interoperability. So I will not dwell on that aspect. But where infrastructure is present, you will find again that because these are disparate systems, there were legacy issues, for instance, where we're coming from. The national financial switch was initially set up for commercial banks. So within the commercial banks themselves, we had some participants with legacy systems and systems that were set up to provide for a certain use case. And so trying to fit in the different rails to achieve interoperability became a bit of a challenge, okay? And overcoming that challenge required a lot of end-user engagement at technical level, end-user engagement at senior level to ensure that budgets are approved and that the buy-in is obtained. Where we could not immediately get a buy-in, we began to see issues of saying, look, I've already got this rail on my system as a commercial bank, and I've got these bilateral interactions with these other participants, and this works for me. So how am I going to let go of what works for something that has just come in new? So that in itself required that we look at everything around what it is we were trying to achieve and ensure that all the stakeholders are onboarded and running together. The issues of integration standards also comes in. Are we going to have API versus ISO? Who is better equipped at understanding ISO and API? How do we get these mappings correct? Because interoperability doesn't end with the transaction going through to the next party, but also speaks into the back office reconciliations and all that surrounds those things. So how are we doing our mappings to ensure that even the back office processing after the transactions have gone through are done in a manner that they do not further delay the completion of a transaction? There were issues also of regulatory frameworks and compliance issues, data protection and data consumer protection. And then lastly, the one that is quite known by all and faced by all is the aspect of cost. This is because most of these solutions that we had were not homegrown, but needed to be bought from outside. So issues of procurement, issues of support, issues of licensing, all come in. So just because of all these factors, you would find that achieving interoperability took a bit of time and is still ongoing. And lastly, I think for us, the fact that we've got the telcos and the commercial banks playing on one platform, we've got these new issues of interchange happening between telcos and banks, which was previously not there. So getting these cost models correct, because we do not want to also have fees, transaction fees that are stopping people from using the infrastructure. So trying to get all this matrix correct is something that is still alive with us, but we're trying to move on a daily basis through consultative meetings, through engagement of various experts who are field experts within the telcos and the banks, sitting together in a room such as this, and just having those ongoing deliberations. I think in a nutshell.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. So I'll move to Aimable. Aimable, the issue of scalability. We've had discussions about bringing a business up to scale. Could you talk a little bit about that in relation to infrastructure and what challenges you face and how you overcame those challenges?
Thank you, Victor.
And tell us a little bit about what you do at R-Switch.
Thank you. My name is Aimable Rukundo. I'm the Chief Digital Innovation. I'm in charge also of the new project at R-Switch. R-Switch is a national switch in Rwanda. And I think we share the same with my colleague here, Morgan. The challenge of interoperability, this is what we want to encounter, and it's quite new. There was a bilateral arrangement here and there, and it seems to work. But bringing interoperability, it's a new challenge, and I think we share all the challenges he elaborated. Here we are talking about inclusive instant payment, and inclusive comes with a cost. And we are also talking about scalability. Maintaining performance of the system, it's a big challenge while considering the cost of infrastructure, and also this area of payment is a very sensitive area. And we are in the region where the internet penetration is not that high, and we are dealing with USSD, whereby the USSD session has really limited capability, whereby you need to consider your system to respond instantly. As the user press *182, you have to keep that in mind to respond immediately. So we need to maintain the availability of the system, and as I said while introducing, this era is new. We don't have much data to estimate the necessary performance of the systems, and most of the case we need to maintain flexibility of vertical and horizontal scalability, which is a challenge in the region where we have to order for more machine while not stopping the services. So the main challenge here is, you know, the interoperability is not one player. We are in the middle, and we need to maintain the performance of our switch, but also not forgetting our partner who are the participants. That is banks, telcos, and also SACCOs, as my colleague elaborated more. So the infrastructure on both ends need to be scalable, and we sometimes we don't have proper estimation on what is the optimal infrastructure we need to have. And sometimes we have the peak, which is wrong, and sometimes we consider the highest peak, let's say 1,000 transactions per second, and some days we get even less than 1 transaction per second. You see, we end up having highest infrastructure, and it gets expensive. So that is the highest challenge we are dealing with. But all in all, we are trying to be optimal and serving the purpose.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll quickly move to George. George is with IPSL in Kenya. If you could introduce yourself, George, and tell us about data privacy and data protection. This is an area that is becoming increasingly important.
Yeah, thank you, Victor. So let me begin by saying it's one of the areas that is a challenge, because first of all, when a lot of hub operators began or switches began, the requirement on data privacy and protection was not really as well defined as it is now, on the one hand. And on the other hand is that financial transactions are made more meaningful and better with data. So when you know the person you're sending the money to, when you know a little bit more about the organization you're sending, is this a business, is this a retail payment, is this a bulk payment, a wholesale payment, it does make the transaction better. There are things you can be able to do to make the experience better. Now, the whole thing about data privacy changes the paradigm, because now all of a sudden the data subject is the center of the universe. And the first problem that I see is that a lot of the data is actually not accurate. A lot of people enter the financial system at different points in time. So some enter when they're students, so they give a phone number and they give their mother's phone number, or they give their neighbor's phone number, and they never change it. And then all of a sudden, you get a complaint from somebody who says, you guys are sending my transaction notifications to my mother, please change. And we go to the institution and tell them you need to clean up the database. And the institution tells us this is quite impossible, because the way people enter our system is through a myriad of ways, and we know that the data would be in the mobile phone number, which is the primary digital identifier for many people, is not accurate. So the question is, how do you clean that up in a way that's flexible, in a way that's low cost, in a way in which you can be able to do it at scale, at societal scale? So that's one of the challenges that is there. I think the second one has to do with knowledge. Now, the regulation was passed quietly. People began to notice there's data protection when people started being fined. So all of a sudden, institutions started getting lawyers to study this. What's this data protection animal? Please explain to us what it is. And I think one of the challenges is there is a knowledge gap, and we brought in legal people to try and understand it, but most legal people are not technology practitioners. So there is a gap there in terms of how do I interpret this into technology practice, to explain to somebody in the technology space what do you need to do to ensure that you're within the ambit of the law and that you're doing it properly according to what the data stipulates. So it's obviously getting better with the regulator responsible for data privacy doing a lot of workshops, and doing a lot of empowerment and capacity building. But I do see that as a challenge. And then the other one over and above that is now the whole thing of, informed consent. I don't know if there's anybody in the room who's ever read, terms and conditions from the bank. Most people say, it's like, trying to read those terms and conditions is like trying to win an argument with your wife. Just shut up and assent. Yeah? So most people don't read it. And now it has to be phrased so that now you're allowing third parties to look at the data. So the challenge is going back to sort of like retrofit something to accept, to fit within the confines of data privacy. But I think if we innovate around low cost, low touch channels, the people can be able to update their information, and we can continue to empower the data subject to be at the center of what happens to their data, what happens to their confidential information, while at the same time ensuring there's just enough access to make the entire financial ecosystem work. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Then the next panelist is Fidelis Muya from the Kenya Bankers Association. Maybe you can tell us why those forms are so complicated. But maybe you could first introduce yourself and then talk about what are the security measures that are required in an inclusive, interoperable payment system with regards to cybersecurity, protection from fraud and protection from cyber attacks.
Thank you, Victor. Good morning, everyone. My name is Fidelis Muya. I work for the Kenya Bankers Association. I'm in charge of technology operations and coordinate bank systems across Kenya. I don't want to answer the question about why you have to sign those things. I'll just tell you, like my friend mentioned here, it's like winning an argument, but you can also look at it this way. In IT, we ask you, which is the biggest lie in the world? Anybody want to guess? Is that a small box we put there? I have read and understood the terms and conditions. Even when I walked into here, I wanted to read those terms and conditions, and Victor told me, no, we know you, just click there, click yes. So there's an issue about, like he says, awareness. The public need to be aware of what information is being collected about them, and the protection offered by the data protection has both rights and responsibilities. I know a lot of people want to collect as much information as possible to ensure that they understand their customer, but then again, you need to balance those rights against the privacy and confidentiality of the consumer to protect themselves from other unsavory practices that we shall not go into in this discussion. So let me confine myself to the discussion you asked me to talk to. This is about protection in terms of an instant payment system from a concept of both data security, cyber security, and also fraud. Now, like my friend from Zambia mentioned here, when you implement an instant payment system, you're actually layering it on top of existing systems. Now, the unfortunate scenario with these existing systems is that they have those, we call it in IT, zonal defense. Essentially, for example, a financial institution originally used to protect their data by protecting the data center. So all their cybersecurity was towards protecting the data center to ensure the data remained at the data center and it was limited in where it would go. Now, in an instant payment system, you are at the center of an ecosystem of multiple players. That's one. Two, data can move in any direction because you are not sure who's coming next. You don't know where the request is coming. It can come from any of those players. So the defense becomes a bigger problem. You cannot adopt the zonal method anymore because you are like a chain. You are the strongest as your weakest link. So you need to protect the whole area. Let's compound that with now you have added users who are actually applying this and interacting with this instant payment switch from a mobile phone. So the exposure, what we call the threat exposure, has expanded beyond even the players. So a cybersecurity attack can come from somebody's mobile system or mobile phone through their financial institutions to the center of your switch and then propagate it across the rest of the system. So when you look at it, the cybersecurity players have to look at the whole ecosystem and defend the whole ecosystem. That's a very, very big challenge. In terms of how do you manage that, you need to ensure that the minimum standards in terms of cybersecurity, one, standards of cybersecurity must be applied across all your players. You cannot compromise. So if we agree that all the players will adopt, for example, ISO 27001 as a standard, then you must, as an ISP or instant payment system provider, make sure that all players have met that standard, because if one of them is not, the hackers and the fraudsters actually are very quick at identifying a weak player in your ecosystem. So you must ensure that. The second thing is resilience. Everybody knows you will be hacked at some point. So the best way to do it is how quickly can you bring this instant security system up? Because again, being instant...
Sorry, Fidelis, if you could hold the microphone closer.
Oh, sorry, I'm not hurt. Okay, can you hear me? Yes, so I was saying, if your system is attacked and there is a problem in terms of downtime, the resilience of how quickly can you bring it up? Because again, the confidence of the public is the instant must be available 24/7, 365, and it must be in seconds. So you cannot afford to have a downtime that will take you 20, 30 minutes to bring up. So let me quickly go into the issues of frauds, and I will just demonstrate by giving you an example of a live situation. When we launched our instant payment switch, one of the financial institutions that was on the platform actually had a threat from internally. They had compromised their internal systems, and the players were actually distributing the money from that institution across to the other players, and they were not targeting one bank. So they penetrated this one bank, and they started transferring money from this bank into all the other banks in the ecosystem. Now, at the center, we noticed that there was an uneven trend and an unusual trend. And we called the bank and we told them, look, we are noticing an unusual trend. Can you please look at it? And they were so defensive, they told us, we don't know what their problem is. So all we had to do is we had to make a decision, and we shut that institution down to stop the flow, and then started convincing them. So the issue of awareness across all the channels in terms of technical support and having a plan of how are you going to respond to an incident. Don't wait for an incident to then react. You need to have all players, you need to make sure that all of them are on the same level, so that if there is an incident, because money is moving instantly, you need to be able to respond instantly. So you must have a plan that all players know that in the event this happens, then this is how you're going to respond. Beyond the technical issues, you need to have an agreement. For example, if I notice a bank has a problem, we must have an agreement as players that if I call you and tell you, please, I'm suspecting frauds are coming into your bank, you need to be able to protect the rest of the ecosystem by responding and either freezing the money while we investigate or doing something like that, so that the consumer confidence in the system is maintained. So in view, that is what I would say, and I don't want to take any more time.
Thank you so much. First of all, I just want to thank the panelists for keeping time. We actually have 6 minutes, so we can take 1 or 2 questions from the audience. Are there any questions from the audience? Okay, if there are none, then I will ask you to summarize in 1 sentence your views on interoperability, scalability, etc. So in terms of interoperability, what would you like us to remember?
Okay, I think for me, let's look at brandless and faceless payment service and access. We shouldn't see a brand to get a financial service. Neither should we look at a face before we offer this service.
Amable, scalability?
scalability is, we have to assure maintaining performance and availability for the system, services, and applications, irrespective of the workload on our system.
George, data privacy protection?
Yeah, so to summarize, I think, we're living in the age of data. And, by looking at the data, is it really the age of data or the age of data and artificial intelligence? So data is this precious commodity that can inform action, it can inform decision making, but at the same time, it needs to be balanced with the rights of the data subject, and it needs to be balanced with staying within what the data privacy and protection regulations require us to do. Yeah.
Thank you, George. Fidelis, on security measures?
Yes, as instant payment switch systems become more prevalent across the economy, a lot of users will depend on it for life-altering situations. You can imagine, I'm in a hospital, I'm paying for something, and then I need the money moving quickly. We cannot afford a downtime, and therefore the confidence of the consumers and the adoption rate of your system is dependent upon the resiliency and the plans you put to ensure that in the event of a cybersecurity issue, you are able to respond quickly and maintain the user confidence. And in the event of frauds or dispute resolutions, there is a way to address the consumer to the point where they are confident that you are able to address, even if you don't give them the money, they feel they have been heard and there's some reasonableness in your dispute resolution processes that gives consumer confidence. That's what I would say.
Thank you. Thank you so much to my panelists. A round of applause, please, for my wonderful panelists.